The broadcast is now starting. All attendees are in listen-only mode.
Greetings, everyone, and thank you for joining us for today's Total Attorneys Power Chat. We're very excited to have Tsakalakis with us discussing building a law firm website that will attract clients. He is a graduate of the University of Michigan and Wayne State for the law school portion of his degree. He worked as a plaintiff's attorney for 2 years before his business partner, Jeff Berman, approached him about his current endeavor, AttorneySync. His time is now mostly spent introducing lawyers to the Internet and vice versa. However, he does miss all the fun of being a lawyer and what works and what doesn't when it comes to using technology and the Internet to market and manage a law firm is one of his specialties. Keith, thank you so much for joining us today. We're really excited to hear your approach to building websites that work and attract clients for today's law firm in this rapidly changing legal community that we find ourselves in, and really appreciate you sharing your insights with us and our listeners.
Chelsea, thank you so much. I'm very happy to be here. Thanks to Total Attorneys for allowing me the opportunity to speak to everyone today, and thank you all for joining us. Again, as Chelsea said, we're going to be discussing building law firm websites that will attract clients. So really two parts. One is focusing on the actual how do I get a website up and running, and the other part is how do I get a website up and running that will actually work to attract clients. So let's begin. The first thing, and I think this is an area where a lot of lawyers don't spend enough time, and that is developing a plan. And when we talk about developing a plan, the real key here is identifying your audiences. And notice that I said audiences because a lot of lawyers will think, their only audience is going to be potential clients. And ultimately, these websites have got to be designed to build business, get new clients in the door. But the way that happens might not always be as clear, and we'll talk a little bit about that today. But when we're thinking about our audiences, these are the questions I like to ask. So, again, spend some time developing a plan, asking yourself these questions. Who do you want to find your website? Obviously, potential clients, but perhaps journalists, perhaps people that in your area that write on legal topics that are relevant to your firm, perhaps other legal professionals that can turn into referral sources. Think about all the different people, all the different audiences that you'd like to find your website. The second question you want to ask yourself is, what are they looking for? In some cases, it's real clear that folks are looking for, a lawyer online. There are certainly a segment of searchers that are, going to Google and using it like a phone book and trying to find a lawyer. But there are a lot more searchers out there and a lot more Internet users in general that are looking to solve problems or get answers to their questions or, find a solution that's right for their specific legal matter or their specific situation. And they might not be just looking for a lawyer, but they might be looking for one of those answers. So think about what your potential clients and what your audiences will be looking for in terms of trying to find you. The next question is, where do they look? Google is certainly a great place. A lot of search engines out there are generating lots of traffic for law firm websites, but there are a lot of other places that Internet users might look for you online. Law firm directories, legal rating sites, local profiles. All these different places are going to tie into, and you're going to want to think about those when you're starting to build your own website because you might want to draw attention to those types of places on your website as well. So really think about where your audiences are looking for you online. Then you want to ask yourself, when they arrive, what will they find? There's so much focus and so much information out there about driving traffic to websites and getting people to your websites, but it's really important that you also take a good hard look at what are people going to see when they get to your website. Does your website look professional? Are you demonstrating that your expertise in your field? Are you answering their questions? Are you providing them solutions? Or are you just basically telling them a little bit about yourself and hoping that they either call you or fill out a form? So really, you're going to want to think about what are users going to find when they get to your website. Think about why they will choose you. What differentiates you? We talk about marketing and branding and all these different ideas in terms of differentiating yourself, but really think about what you do better than your competition, and think about what you can offer that's going to help a consumer or legal service consumer or somebody else that's out there looking for you to choose you, to pick up the phone to call you, to submit a contact request, or to download something from your website. And finally, how will you help them? Again, you want to really focus on what are the ways that you're going to help the visitors to your website. What information are you offering them? What kind of questions can you answer? What kind of solutions can you provide them? What problems can you solve? And how are you going to help solve those problems? You really want to think about that in the developing stage of your website. The more time you put into developing a plan, the more effective your ultimate website is going to be, and the less modification you'll have to do down the road.
And this list can also be used for someone who has an existing website that's looking to do, a revamp or just an update to the site itself. They could use this list to kind of refresh and restart as well.
Absolutely. Again, I think that in addition to websites, I think this is a great list for legal professionals to be thinking about in all aspects of any marketing approach or any advertising they're doing. But it's certainly effective for an existing website and developing a plan for a new website. So absolutely.
And just kind of placing yourself in the shoes of your potential clients, and I completely agree. It's a great exercise for all areas of your business, new or existing.
So the next step, and this is really the first, after you get a nice plan in place, the first tangible step to actually getting a website up and running is thinking about your domain. And your domain is, for a lot of folks out there that might not be familiar with what that is, for the purposes of this webinar, we're just going to use that as kind of like your address. It's going to be the words in between the www and the .com, or the www and the .org, or whatever you end up choosing as your top level domain. I recommend .com, but it's going to be those words in between. And so there's a couple different major aspects of choosing a domain that we want to talk about. And the first is going to be branding. Certainly it might come naturally to a lot of lawyers to think about using either their own personal name or their firm's name in their domain. And this can be very good in terms of branding, especially if you have a very memorable either individual name or law firm name. Again, it positions you as professional. It's very personal, and it's an easy choice to make. Unfortunately, a lot of firms will either have much longer names, or they'll use initials, and they might not be as well recognized. And again, you want to spend time developing your brand, but you also might consider trying to choose something that's a little bit more keyword oriented, and this will also come into play for search engines. So Google uses domains as one of the signals that tells Google about what your website's about. And we've seen a lot of great success with lawyers that choose exact match domains. And so that would mean if you have if you're an Arizona bankruptcy lawyer, for example, you might choose ArizonaBankruptcyLaw.com to try to rank for Arizona bankruptcy law. And it also gives the user a certain, right off the bat, an understanding of what your site's going to be about. So if you don't use an exact match domain, certainly a keyword-rich domain can be helpful. Again, if your domains are taken, you might want to consider using hyphens. Although, as a general guideline, you want to try to avoid hyphens the best you can. And you want to make it memorable and try to keep it as short as possible. So, even for a lot of lawyers too, we might suggest that you do something that's a combination of both branding and keyword-rich domains. So, maybe you'd use John Smith, Arizona lawyer, or something to that effect. Finally, you list on here domise.com, and that's a website that you can use to quickly find whether or not a domain is available or not. You can do that through your host, which we'll talk about in a second, but it's a lot faster to go to something like domise.com and type in a variety of different domains to see what's available and to see what you might be able to get right now versus having to go out and purchase a domain from somebody else.
Great. And next we're moving into hosting. And I think that there's a lot of confusion around registering your domain and what happens after, and that they're not usually connected.
Right. And so this is where I think there can be unnecessary confusion, because it's really, once you get your domain, there's really only two real techie side things that you got to start thinking about and really understand. And as this slide indicates, registration is not the same thing as hosting. So when you register your domain, you're basically telling the internet that you're taking this domain out and claiming it as yours. Hosting, on the other hand, is where your site's actually going to live. So that's where you're actually going to store your files, where you might have your your database and all those kind of things. So that's more of like the the space where your actual website lives. Registration just means that you're claiming that domain. So once you pick a domain, the first step will be to go and register the domain, and the second step will be to set up a hosting account. And they've really ISPs have come a really long way in the hosting. They've made it much more easy to use. It used to be you had to understand a lot of technical stuff to get a hosting account set up, and there still are a lot of companies that are leveraging setting up hosting accounts. But it's become so easy that even with some basic research, spending a little time, I would recommend that most lawyers could probably certainly register and probably set up their hosting on their own.
And hosting, there's a variety of companies that offer hosting. Can we talk through just a few of the differences that you're going to look for when thinking about who your provider should be?
Sure. I've listed some of the the basic aspects to hosts up here, and we can talk about some that I've used and some problems. But the majority of the issues with hosting have to do with uptime, speed, the cost, what kind of operating system it's on, what kind of support the hosting provider provides, and functionality. So we'll kind of go through those a little bit more slowly. As I said before, the hosting is really where your site will live online. Uptime is the amount of time, how reliable the host is. So the amount of uptime that your site's going to be up, or how long the host is not down. And usually that's going to be in the upper 90th percentile, so you're 98%, 99% uptime. Anything below that, you're probably going to want to avoid that host. Speed's actually a much more important component. Speed is going to be how fast your site loads for visitors. This has become a much more important signal to Google as well. So most of the major hosting providers have pretty good speed, but it's also going to depend on what kind of account you set up with them. If you set up a real basic economy class account, it might be a little bit slower. If you're talking about using a shared IP address, it might be a little slower. Although depending on the host, I'd probably recommend at least to start shared hosting accounts for most legal professionals, especially so as the small firms. If you're a much bigger firm, you might consider a dedicated IP address and some other features, or even setting up your own hosting yourself. But speed's going to be a big issue. It's going to be one of the major factors, because if your site doesn't load for when a visitor comes there, obviously that's not going to be a good user experience, and Google's going to frown upon that and not show you as much in their results, and your users are also going to bounce off your page. So speed's really important. Cost is another consideration, but again, hosting's become such a commodity that it's very competitive for the host, and so you can get some great hosting services for very inexpensive. Certainly, between the top providers, you're certainly not going to spend more than $30 a month for even a pretty good robust hosting package. That's a shared hosting package. When you start getting more to dedicated IP addresses and dedicated hosting, things can get more expensive, maybe $100 a month. But go out there, shop around, look for these different types of factors, and see who's really making the best deal for you. But again, don't necessarily go for the cheapest, because the cheapest might be a little bit more slower. They might not have as many servers. They might be trying to load more websites on each IP address, and so all those things will play a role in your speed. So you want to balance those. I have Linux up here, and Linux is an open source hosting operating system, basically. Usually it's either Linux or Microsoft's alternative IIS hosting platform. I recommend Linux. Most of the major hosts should provide Linux. A little bit easier to use. If you're already on an IIS platform, a lot of hosts will offer to switch you over to Linux. I just think that it's a better platform to be using. But again, most of the major providers will have that option for you. Support's also very important to think about, especially if you're not very tech savvy. You might have questions, and you don't want to have to wait in a queue for hours. And the support can vary widely depending on the host. Some of the major providers have a little better hostings. They're a little more equipped with the infrastructure, but certainly ask and look around on their site for what their support options are. Look for things like live chat. That's great, because then if you're having problems, their support people can help you right from their computer, in a live chat window, which is really nice. And then functionality, finally, that's when you're thinking about what type of services you can use on your host. So sometimes very basic, and again, economy class hosts won't allow you to install WordPress or won't allow you to install more complicated web apps. So again, you want to make sure that you can install web apps, certainly WordPress, but I can just I can tell you at least two, not to make any recommendations one way or another, but GoDaddy and HostGator are both major host providers, and both of them in their deluxe accounts will allow you to do WordPress. So you just want to ask about that when you're looking to set up your hosting account. Make sure that you can install a web app or a content management system. It'll really make your life a lot easier.
I think that's a great point to just go through this list with providers. And a lot of this you'll find wrapped up inside of what's called an SLA, or a service level agreement, that is essentially the contract that binds the hosting provider to uptime. It'll also identify the support vehicles that contractually they're obligated to provide to you. So there's just some fine print inside of those service level agreements that you want to make sure that you give them a good read-through before actually contracting or signing up with a hosting provider.
That's a really good point. Okay, so once we've gotten our domain and we've registered it and we've taken out our hosting account, and we're starting to think about how we want our website to look, you're going to start thinking about design considerations. And design is one of those things that's a little bit tricky because there's a lot of subjectivity into it. There's a lot of personal preference. So I just kind of wanted to go through some of the major design options from in terms of the directions that you can go from the beginning. So we start to talk about template-based designs, and template-based designs are going to be the types of things that you see all over the place. They're kind of out of the box. The benefit is that they're much easier to use than when you start to get into the custom or the professionally designed website. But the downside is that your website might end up looking like your competition's website, which is is really bad, and you really want to avoid looking like everybody else online and really find ways to distinguish yourself. Although with some minor modifications, a template can be nice. A theme is more specific to WordPress, which we'll get to talking about in a little bit here. But themes are, they can be kind of a step up from a template, a little bit more customization. You can change them up a little bit more. They tend to be, both templates and themes will range from free to premium themes, which will be a little bit more expensive depending on where you go. But there are literally, especially when you're talking about WordPress and Joomla and some of the major content management systems, there are literally millions of themes to choose from. So find one that you like the look of if you go that direction. Again, it's much more affordable to go that direction. You can even get a nice free theme. And it's really easy to use. That's the real nice part about it. Custom can be great too. So you can either get it, you can even have someone customize a theme. So maybe you pay, a couple $100 to a couple $1,000 for a nice customized theme. It gives you a lot more control of the look and feel of your website, so you can get something that really appeals to you. But again, that can start to get pricey, and if you're really trying to keep costs down, a basic template or even a premium template or theme might be the way to go. But if you want to invest a little bit more in your design aspects, custom themes will give you a lot more flexibility. They can, there are a lot of designers out there that do a very nice job. Even for a couple $100 to a couple $1,000 for a theme design. Much more than that, and it's you start to have to balance the real value of the design versus the function of the website. But certainly a nice custom theme can really distinguish you from your competition. And then of course you can go into like a fully professionally designed theme, or maybe you can start from scratch. Again, that can get a bit more expensive, but the upside is that you can really distinguish yourself and really get a look and feel that you like. One thing that I recommend a lot of times too is for lawyers that don't have a logo is to think about getting a professionally designed logo from the start, because then you can develop your website theme off of that logo. And 99 Designs is actually a company that we use a lot. They do crowdsourced logo design. They'll actually also do website theme and template design. And it's nice because you get a lot of different designers putting input, and you can vote on different design elements and say you like this or don't like that, and you get to provide a lot of feedback. And it's been a really good process for us, so I just wanted to recommend that. But I think that it's important for lawyers to keep design in perspective. We always say that there's a threshold of professionalism that's absolutely essential to prevent people from bouncing off your site. If you look at studies of usability, you'll see that there'll be a certain, it's kind of like a bell curve, there's a certain point at which people will bounce off if you're not professional enough. But beyond that, when you really start adding a lot of the bells and whistles, they don't really have the return that you might hope that they would in terms of getting people online. And in fact, a lot of the bells and whistles can be distracting from the content of your site, which is really what you want your visitors to be focused on.
And I'd also just kind of like to make the point that when contemplating hiring a professional to do design elements or the website build itself, or contemplating whether you're going to do it on your own, just make sure that you adjust your expectations for your own learning curve and your own availability. Even though you may be saving a few $100s by doing certain things yourself, the end product may not be the same as what you had envisioned or expected, and it may take you 3 to 5 times longer than hiring a professional, which may move your launch date for the website out considerably, or the project may drag on longer than you want it to.
No, then those are great points, and we see that all the time, and that's kind of so the trade-off is, because it kind of works both ways. And on the one hand, as Chelsea mentioned, if you undertake something and it gets beyond the scope of what you're able to do, it might delay your project. But you also be very careful on the developer designer end, because hiring the wrong designer, you might have the exact same problem. So I think Chelsea really hit the nail on the head, though, is to match up your needs with your expectation level. If you're looking for something affordable right out of the box, maybe just a template-based design is the way to go. If you're looking for something that's a little bit more custom, a little bit more, within what you're looking for, you might consider custom, but make sure you find the right designer that fits your needs, and talk about these things. Talk about timelines and those things up front, so that you're not delaying your project, because that's one of the biggest problems with web development in general is that you set these initial target dates and they're never quite what you originally agreed upon. So make sure that you really talk that out from the beginning.
Absolutely, and when discussing timelines, it is completely expected for those discussions to take place, during the initial consultation phase, and for designers or contractors to be held to those dates. One additional piece of advice that I would just give our listeners is make sure that you give yourself some additional time for revisions. You may get, the finished product back from the contractor or the designer that you're working with, and you didn't necessarily budget for the revision time. You're most likely going to have changes. You may go through 2 or 3 cycles of changes before you really get it to the place that you're comfortable with, and there's either additional cost or additional time or both associated with that. So just know that there are going to be a few rounds of revisions and that you'll need to work through those.
Great points. So then we're going to start talking a little bit about development. So those are the 2 big, headings when we're talking about getting a website off the ground. You start with design. That's trying to understand what the site's going to look like, and then development is kind of the behind the scenes. How are things working to actually implement this design? And we could talk a lot about different. Development's a whole topic of itself. Web development's a huge area, but I really like to break it down into 2 major categories, and we're going to call it hard coding and content management systems. And hard coding is really kind of the old school way, in my opinion, of doing websites. It still makes a lot of sense for certain firms, but when we're talking about hard coding, we're talking about a developer taking your design and actually going out and writing the code for the website that's going to actually implement that design. And so, hard coding is, it's been around for a long time, but when we talk about it, there's certainly some costs involved with doing hard coding to take into consideration. And then also, depending on who your developer is, they might do things that aren't going to be as search engine friendly as you might like them to be. A lot of developers just aren't familiar with some of the structural and architecture components that make things search engine friendly. And again, if you're going to go the hard coding route, you're going to want to talk about those things right from the beginning. The content management system is relatively newer. It's been around for several years, but in the terms of the internet, it's rather new, and it actually makes things a lot more easy. So it's basically web software, which allows you to create a website, but to do it in a way that would make sense even for someone that doesn't have coding experience. So for folks that are thinking, I want to get a website up, but I don't really want to invest in having a developer, do things from scratch, a content management system is really nice. And so I just named, there are several content management systems out there. Here are just three of the major ones that we see a lot of, and that's WordPress, Drupal, and Joomla. WordPress, just one thing to think about is that there's a difference between WordPress.com and WordPress.org. WordPress.com is actually WordPress actually hosts your website, and so you might have something at johnsmith.wordpress.com. WordPress.org will allow you to actually download their open source software and install it on your own host. And in fact, GoDaddy, HostGator, some of the major hosting providers make WordPress a one-click installation with a script. And so you can literally, once you get your hosting account set up, click install WordPress, and you're up and running, and you've got the web app structure all in place. And that's the thing that I want our listeners to really recognize is, a lot of you I know are thinking, I can't develop. I don't know code. I don't know HTML. I don't know PHP. I can't write a website. But these content management systems really make it possible now for you to set up your own website. And again, with the way that the hosting scripts are going, you can even do it with one click. And then it's just a matter of getting your content on there, moving some pages around, choosing your theme and that kind of thing. So again, if you go the content management system route, you're going to save yourself a lot of heartache, in my opinion. Unless you really, if you need something really custom structure built, if you're a huge law firm and these content management systems just aren't robust enough for what you're looking for, you might want to consider hard coding. But I'll tell you this: the New York Times is built on WordPress. These content management systems are really becoming ubiquitous online. And it's because of this ease of use, the flexibility, and they're open source. And so there's a lot of people contributing to keeping the code updated and adding a lot of functionality through plugins and things like that.
Absolutely, and that also helps with the ongoing consulting fees or management fees of maintaining a site after it's complete. You want to be cognizant that you don't tie yourself into a consulting agreement where every time you'd like to change the name of a page or a drop-down menu, you have to pay an hourly rate for those services. So that's also an additional benefit of having a content management system in place and being able to just log in and make changes whenever you feel like it.
No, I'm so glad you brought that up because we run into that all the time. Again, the developers, a lot of developers will charge by the time for revisions. It gets very expensive, but even worse is that the web is changing and evolving. Your competition is moving so fast now that it's just not acceptable to have to wait 3 weeks to a month to 6 months for a web developer to implement a change. When we get clients that have those kind of problems, we strongly advise them to get off of those systems because it's just you can't add content fast enough. You can't make the changes necessary fast enough. And again, when you do make those changes, if you go the route of actually having somebody in-house, it's going to cost you an arm and a leg. And so really strongly advise that you consider content management systems up front because it's really going to make your life a lot easier. You're going to be able to make changes a lot faster, and you're going to save yourself a lot of money.
Absolutely. And let's talk about some of the content that makes up your site. Voice, static pages, calls to action. Do you give away freebies, testimonials? How flashy do you make it? Do you want to start working through these one by one?
Sure. So voice is really, we're talking about finding your own voice of your website. Everybody is going to, every firm, every legal professional is going to have their own voice, and finding that voice and keeping that voice consistent through your website is very important. Are you more casual? Are you more serious? What kind of tone is your website or your blog going to take? It's something worth thinking about right from the start because, again, you want that to be as consistent as you can so that you're sending that same message throughout. Static pages are going to be, your basic, the more traditional page that you might think about. Perhaps you have a practice area overview page, an attorney profile page, contact us page, versus, either post content or more dynamic content that's more frequently changed, news updates, RSS feeds, things like that. So, you do want to have some core static pages that really speak to your users so that they understand what it is you're all about and how you're going to help them. Calls to action are very important. Again, this goes back to one of our original questions: is what are our users going to do when they actually come to our website? It's great to get somebody on your web to actually visit your website. It's great to get them reading your content, but ultimately you want them to take some kind of action that moves them along in the process to becoming a new client and new business for the firm. So a call to action is basically telling your website visitor, hey, do this. So that might be a phone number with a free consultation, depending on your practice. It might be a form fill, a contact us page. It might be a register for a free consultation. It might also be, when we start talking about freebies, it might be something like download this guide, subscribe to our newsletter. There are a variety of ways that you can get your users engaged with your content. It's very important that you have those calls to action very visible. Keep it very simple. You don't want your users to be questioning what they should be doing. And you certainly don't want them just to be reading your content, bouncing off your page, and not taking any action at all. It's not very helpful. So, again, freebies, free information, frequently asked questions, downloadable guides, all these types of things that are free offers for your website visitors will encourage them to take some kind of action. And again, it's great for building, if you're doing an email marketing campaign, it's great for building lists like that. It's great for, just making an initial contact, if they're requesting information for your site, from your site, and they're opting in. And so again, you want to think about all those different ways that you can offer free information. You got to be careful. Again, legal professionals, we've got ethical codes that we have to be concerned about. I certainly, request that everybody would check out their professional rules on what they would be okay to offer and what wouldn't be okay to offer. But again, the free information, answering general questions, most of the time that's not going to be a problem. Testimonials, same type of thing. Again, professional standards there, but testimonials are very strong, whether they're professional testimonials from other lawyers, whether they're former client testimonials. Again, that's building that trust into the website, and that's going to help readers stay on your website. It's going to encourage them to take action. It's going to encourage them to become, more frequent visitors, and hopefully actually pick up the phone to call you. So again, professional rules are there, but you want to make sure that you're in compliance. But testimonials are definitely something that I would encourage most legal professionals to consider. And then we talk about flashy versus simple. We kind of talked about this under the design phase as well, but it's really important that you don't get carried away with the bells and whistles. A long time ago, people were really focused on getting all this fancy stuff on their website, and the truth is that the simple, clean, elegant websites just perform better in terms of usability. Don't distract from the content of your site. Don't distract from the things that are actually going to help your users take some kind of action. We see a lot of these little videos that pop up, and again, don't get me wrong, video can be strong, but really the way that you execute it makes all the difference. Think simple, think clean, think professional.
And just a couple comments I'll make about the content on the site. We have clients who've had a tremendous amount of success with their own sites, having an About Me section and really building up that attorney profile or having individual profiles for each of the attorneys in the firm. I think that ties back to, voice of, do you want it to be, if you're doing IP patent trademark law, you may have a very different voice and presentation of the attorney's background and their credentials than if you're a firm that does specifically father's rights in family law. And making the client feel comfortable working with you, telling them a little bit about some of the work that you've done previously, or maybe some of the philanthropy work that you do in your personal life, can help them get kind of that warm and fuzzy feeling from the website and make them want to have a conversation with you and learn more. Whereas other practice areas like IP patent trademark law or small business may want to present a different professional image with background on their experience in the technology space, and to just kind of keep that in mind as you're building out your voice and providing some information about yourself, whether it's a picture or a full profile.
No, absolutely. I think you made a lot of great points there. It really ties back to thinking about your audiences, personalizing your messaging, and making sure that, again, that when you're sharing information about yourself, share it in a way that demonstrates your expertise and shows how you're going to help your visitors. One thing that I think that I see too much online is the website's a focus on the legal professional. And again, it's very important that you communicate your abilities and your reputation, but you got to do it in a way that's subtle and in a way that communicates how you're going to solve your user's problem, how you're going to solve your client's problem, how you help them, and weave in that information about yourself in a way that really helps answer those questions. And again, that's all part of developing your voice and keeping your audience in mind.
Absolutely.
Okay, so we're going to talk a little bit about blogs. Just for folks that, there's a lot of different ways to look at what a blog is. So let's just kind of use a working definition. And a blog is really just a platform for you to be able to post content and move content around quickly, in my opinion. It'll list posts or articles in a reverse chronological order. So your most recent posts will be the most current thing, and they'll have primacy on your site. And so the first question is, why do I need a blog? And there's a lot of different opinions about blogging and how blogs should work, and I'll give you my 2 cents. And you basically have to decide how the blog is going to best fit into your own website. But a blog really allows you to keep your content on your website fresh, which is great for search engines. They really like that. The freshness is a huge factor, so that your site's not stale. It allows you to give. It's kind of like an in-between in terms of static pages and something that might be more conversational, like a different form of social media. So it's kind of in between there, but it allows you to really speak to your audience. It can allow you to share firm news, but again, it really comes down to the freshness and also the interactivity, because blogs will allow your users to comment if you leave comments open. Again, if you do decide to do that, you're going to want to look into or comment moderation so that your comments aren't automatically posted, because you'll see a lot of spam and things out there in the wild web. So I do recommend comment moderation, but it really helps your users engage with what you're writing about. Journalists love to do when they're researching articles. They look for blogs. Blogs have become a great thing between different legal professionals that write on certain subjects as ways to interact. Folks will add your blog to their feed readers, so it brings them back to your site a lot more. And again, this freshness, this idea of having frequent content always coming out, it demonstrates that your site is being cared for, and again, both good for search engines and returning visitors. It also makes it really easy to, if you're using a content management system, makes it really easy to add videos, photographs, different graphics, all those types of images that really help engage your users, because there's especially when you're talking about legal subject matter, things can get pretty dry, and so the more that you can make things interesting through the use of videos and how-tos and tips and answering questions through video and through different photos to keep things interesting, the much more effective your website and your blog will be than if it's just straight static pages and you're not updating them very frequently and you're not giving your users a way to comment or interact with your content.
Absolutely. And in the event that comments are posted on your blog that are inappropriate or just not something that you want displayed on your site, you always have the ability to remove those.
Right, and that's kind of what I was saying with the moderation, is that you should always have it set up so that comments, I keep saying content, the comments are subject to editorial review before posting. And all the major content management systems will allow you to do that. So, you can do some quick research, and what you'll be looking for is, how to moderate comments and comment moderation on your blog. And it's really quite easy to do. Most of the, WordPress, for example, is just a check of one box, and contents have to be approved by you before they're posted, and so that way you don't get yourself in trouble there.
And how about the content for the website itself? How would you advise that our listeners approach building out the content for the website itself initially and then ongoing?
Sure. So to get started, we talk about having a couple basic pages. Certainly a home page, an about the attorneys page. So if you've got, if you're a solo and you've got one attorney, you might just have one page dedicated to it. but I do recommend that you try to have attorney profile pages for each attorney, or as many attorneys as you possibly can. A practice area page that breaks down your practice categories is always a very effective page. And then, of course, a contact page that will offer several different ways to contact the legal professionals at the firm. And the content, again, is going to be the real difference maker in how successful your website is in bringing in new clients. Because if your content is flat, or if it doesn't answer the question or the research issue that the user is trying to answer, it's likely they're going to go try to find that somewhere else. And so it's really important that your content demonstrates you professionally, so it shows your expertise. It's very important that it helps your users answer their questions. And with all of your content on your site, it's very important that you think like your users think. Use phrases, use language that your users would use. Again, as Chelsea pointed out, this language might vary greatly depending whether if you do criminal defense work or intellectual property work. But think about those audiences again, and write for those audiences. So on your About Us page, make sure you're using the types of words that are going to help them understand how you specifically are going to answer those questions. What professional what parts of your reputation are actually going to help them choose you over your competition. Again, write content that people will read, and then there's this issue of who's going to write the content. And so obviously there are a lot of different ways you can go about this. Not everybody's a great writer, and certainly not. There are a lot of folks that just aren't comfortable writing it for the web, and there's a big difference between writing a legal brief and writing for the web. And so you have to ask yourself whether or not you want to hire somebody professionally to write your content. And I definitely think it's worth looking into. Depending on the content, it's really all over the map, and you get what you pay for. So on the low end, if you get inexpensive content, you might be sacrificing a lot in terms of professional responsibility. On the high end, you can get some really great content. It'll make all the difference. But if this is something that you're comfortable with yourself, I certainly encourage you to give it a shot. But if you do that, keep in mind it's very important that you're speaking to your audience. Keep those audiences in mind. Keep your message consistent. And again, maybe you give it maybe give it a shot yourself, and then maybe you have some other lawyers in the firm look at it, or have an independent editor look at it. Again, that's a nice way to save some money too, is if you can get a nice framework in place. You don't have to have all the content written by a professional by scratch, but maybe someone just takes a look at it and maybe dresses things up. There's a lot of other ways to get content too for your site, and a lot of them have to do with talking to other legal professionals about guest blogging, other bloggers, encouraging users to if you have Q&A sections of your site or frequently asked questions, some of the your interactions with your clients and potential clients and intake interviews and even professional conversations really give you a lot of great ideas for adding content to your site. So always be thinking, in the back of your head, with all the other things you've got going on in your day. I know it's difficult, but keep in the back of your head, does this make a great blog post? Is this a great, would this be a great question to add into my Q&A site? Think about those things and use the terminology and the questions that your clients, your potential clients, and the people that are coming to your website would ask.
Absolutely. And then why do you need to write content for my site?
Okay, so again, content should be, if we really broke all this stuff down into percentages, your focus on content, in my opinion, should be around 90% of your focus. Depending on how you write your content, the first thing it's going to do is help attract links to your site. So, without going into a whole background of the internet, links are an important thing to have. They're basically votes for your site, and the way that you write your content is going to make it linkable or not linkable. So, if someone likes what they see, they're much more likely to link to it. If you give them a reason or incentive to link to it, again, that you're going to increase the likelihood that they're going to actually provide you a link, and that's very important. It also creates more outlets for consumers to reach you. So the more content that you have, likely the more pages that are going to get indexed by the search engines, the more variety of terms that people are going to arrive on your site for those terms, for those search phrases. And so again, the frequent content, is very important in terms of getting more visibility in the search engines. And really most importantly, your content is what's going to demonstrate your expertise in your field. The content is a way for you to say, hey, look, I really am knowledgeable about this subject without actually saying it. You want to focus on the substantive material, show what you know about a particular issue, talk about a recent, court case or an issue that your clients might be facing, talk about how you solve that problem. That really demonstrates you as an expert. We talked about earlier, it helps with search engine visibility. The more content, the more search phrases that you're going to end up coming up for. And again, this is where the interaction takes place between your users and you, and it builds a relationship with clients and other professionals. So, this is the content is going to be the difference maker in terms of getting people to become new clients, and as well as getting other legal professionals to recognize your expertise and enter into referral relationships with you.
And just as one point I'll mention is, as you're writing all of this content, at the end when you have everything or you're about to post it to the site, just giving it a once-over to make sure that you are following the ethical rules associated with legal advertising. And if you're working with outside contract writers or having people guest post on your site, to just give it a once-over before it goes live.
No, absolutely. Again, each legal professional is going to be responsible for their own professional reputation online, and you certainly wouldn't want to turn that over to someone that you don't trust. And so it's especially when you're getting into a new relationship with someone that's writing for the first time on your behalf, or if you're doing guest posts or guest bloggers and things like that, absolutely you're going to want to have editorial review before anything's posted. Take the time to look at it until you actually get comfortable with that person as a writer.
Absolutely. And then that transitions nicely into our next slide as to whether or not you should hire a professional content writer.
Right, and so that's a tough question to ask. And everybody's going to have to answer that for themselves. I wanted to just really briefly touch on some of these bullet points about how to structure the content. Again, for the web, you want to keep things simple, keep things very short, use bold text where appropriate, organize your content. Don't use long narratives. It's not going to work online. Bullet point lists, both unordered and ordered lists, are great to use. People love lists online. Again, this ties into all of the messages that we've talked about throughout the webinar, but be conversational. Don't be markety. Don't tell people how hard you're going to work on their behalf. Stay away from the traditional imagery that people might be using for better or for worse on television. Be conversational, answer questions, help solve problems. Avoid legalese. Speak to your audiences. That's, again, we can't reiterate that enough. Think about your audience. If your audience isn't using legalese, don't use it. Pictures and illustrations are great. There it is again. Consider your audience and make sure to include calls to action even in your content. So in addition to contact forms and phone numbers, find ways to work calls to action to get your users to do things inside your content. So now we're on to hiring a professional content writer. And again, you got to decide. This is a big decision. If you write things yourself, you've got complete control over it. You can control the voice. It's very cost-effective in terms of you're not shelling out money for it, although it is going to take a considerable amount of time, and so you have to weigh the value of your time there. Hiring a professional will save you time. Obviously, you won't have to do it yourself, but again, this is going to get a little bit more expensive. There are a lot of content writers also that are really familiar with how the search engine works, so they can help you write content that's search engine friendly. And again, a lot of these folks are trained for writing for the web, so they really understand what's the most effective way to write for the web. But as Chelsea mentioned before, if you decide to get a professional, make sure you review everything up front. You want to have ultimate editorial control. And content writing is, again, one of those places that it's really going to be, you get what you pay for. If you're paying $10 to $20 an article, it's likely that you're probably going to have some pretty basic article writing. Professional writers might even charge by the word. Some clients that we've worked with have even hired journalists in-house just so they have someone that can get new content and firm news up to the site in a very professional way. But really think long and hard about that decision, because again, the content is going to be the difference maker for your site. And if you decide to outsource that, make sure you see exactly what's going on your website. And another way to think about content too is, there are a lot of different ways to get content. As users comment on your site, that's going to be a great way to add content to the site. Engage in those discussions. As we spoke about before, guest bloggers. Having other people that other lawyers, write on your site and contribute to your site is a great way to get more content. Interns, paralegals. Some of the firms we work with, if you're an IP lawyer, you might have engineers on staff. Maybe they can contribute content. If you're a personal injury lawyer, you might have nurses or medical people on staff. They might be able to contribute content. But there are a lot of different ways that you can add content to your site so that the burden isn't on you. And you want to consider all these different avenues. And again, the more different voices and the more different contributors you have on your site, the more interesting and the more rich your site's going to be.
And also think about just your network, your social network, personally and professionally as well. It may make sense if you have attorneys or other professionals that you have referral relationships with to guest blog on each other's sites or to provide content for each other's sites. I know a lot of our small business attorney clients collaborate with CPAs because they have a similar audience and a similar client base. You may find that other attorneys in your bar association are looking for a vehicle to establish themselves as thought leaders or just get out and start blogging a little bit more or making guest blog posts on other sites. So I'd expand that, bring it up as general conversation if you're at a local bar event or having a conversation with a referral partner. And you may be surprised.
Absolutely. Okay, so a couple words on SEO. SEO is, again, one of those areas that's a whole conversation itself, and, probably one of those words that have a lot of lawyers wincing just because there's, a lot of unscrupulous SEO type stuff going out there. But it's worth mentioning because, again, there is a lot of, potential, visitor traffic and new clients from search engines. So, just a couple words on that. SEO is search engine optimization. One of the great things is that out of the box, the content management systems, with a couple clicks of a button, you can do a lot of the technical components that are necessary to tell search engines what your site's about. So that makes that part of it easier. But there's a whole other side to things in terms of actually attracting links and getting more visibility. But I just want to make a couple points about SEO and before we wrap up here. But the first thing you want to think about are your keywords. So again, when we were at very back at the beginning, we're thinking about our audiences. It all ties together. Think about those search words that people would use to find you. And obviously, the direct terms like personal injury lawyer or Chicago personal injury lawyer, those are very direct terms, and you might think those are great buying terms, and they're going to convert at a high rate. But they're also going to be very competitive. And so you also want to think about all the different research type terms. Again, if you're a criminal defense attorney, maybe someone's researching a specific issue about a hearing that's coming up for them, or what their, the penalty they might be facing if they're convicted. So think about all those different keyword phrases and keep record of that, and try to find ways to work that into your content, work it into your blog posts. But don't go crazy. Again, always write for your users. Don't write for search engines. Tags are also another thing that you might think about in terms of SEO. Again, it really comes down to organizing content on your site. Breaking things down into categories and tagging things will help organize it, but you want to think about how you implement those things, because that can have an impact on how the search engines view it. But stay organized and really stay relevant and niche to what you're actually doing. Don't try to be everything for everyone, because you'll dilute what your impact on the search engines. We talked about this earlier, but fresh content is very important for SEO. The more frequently that you're updating your site, that's why the blog, again, plays such an important role. Keep things fresh, keep things up to date. Think about your social media. Think about how you might want to share your content and get it out to the right audience. Don't blast it, but find people that you think might be a good audience for sharing something with, and be comfortable sharing those things. And again, with all the online stuff, There's certainly professional responsibility things to think about, but I do think there tends to be this fear-mongering with online. The internet's here. It's just finding ways to use it appropriately and effectively to build clients. So, think about all those things. And again, all of these different strategies, focusing on content, getting that content in front of the right audiences, it's going to attract links, which is really one of the most important parts of SEO and getting more visibility in search engines.
And SEO can be an intimidating topic if you're not familiar with it, and it can be an overwhelming project if you allow it to be. I think going back to the content management system and the benefits that offers, I think one of the great benefits for me personally, just using something like Joomla in a site that I managed a couple of years ago, was the ability for me to create content but also take care of the keywords and the tagging at the same time as the content creation. Managed a few different websites, and it's very easy to skip over those details and save it for later, and I'll come back and I'll do the tags, or I'll come back and I'll do the keywords, and either it's difficult to find that time, or it just becomes a very overwhelming task of now having to go back through half of the site and add all of those things. So if you're creating the keywords and the tags at the same time that you're creating the content, it's just my personal belief that the process becomes a little bit easier and a little bit less daunting. And then you can have the site building upon itself over time.
Yeah, and just to kind of add on to that, again, it can be the concepts can be very easy, and there's two resources I like to share with folks out there. One is if you just go to Google and search for Google's SEO Starter Guide. That's a great resource. It's from Google. Everything you do is going to be above board. It's the recommendations by Google on SEO, and it gives you a really great background. So again, if you just search for Google SEO Starter Guide or Search Engine Optimization Starter Guide, it's a free PDF. You don't even have to fill out a form. They just give it to you. Another great resource is SEO Moz. That's SEOMOZ.org. They have a free guide available. Really break things down in simple, easy, digestible pieces, so that for folks that are overwhelmed by SEO, it's a great place to start. SearchEngineLand.com is also another great place to start, but I'd certainly recommend folks that they're interested in SEO and want to try to handle it on their own. Start with the Google Starter Guide and SEO Moz's Beginner Guide. A little bit more on SEO here. So, why do I need others to link to my page? Again, those links are like votes in the eyes of the search engines, but it's an unequal democracy. So votes from very authoritative sites like CNN or New York Times are a lot heavier, more heavily weighted than a website that I set up yesterday. So that's why the links are so important. They signal to Google that your site is authoritative on its topic. And again, when you're talking about attracting links, it really comes down to doing a great job of your content, keeping it interesting. Guest blogging is a great way to get links, because if you post a post on somebody else's blog, and perhaps in your byline, your author byline, you have a link back to your website. That's a really easy way to get an authoritative, relevant link. A lot of times what I'll recommend to some of our clients is, call up some of your buddies. See if they've got websites that are worth doing some kind of linking with. Ask them if they'll put a link either on their blog roll, or maybe they've got, you've got a page of content that might make sense to add to their site that will help their users and also add a link back to your site. Press releases are an interesting way to generate links. They're, for a couple $100, you can have a pretty full-scale press release campaign that will generate, different types of links across different news release sites. If you do a press release, though, try to come up with something newsworthy. Don't do a press release for the sake of press release. It won't be as effective. Buying links is one of those areas where it starts to get into the grayer areas of things, but I'll say this, there are all sorts of different takes on this. Certainly some of the safer ways to, quote-unquote, buy links are to sign up for reputable directories. So places like the Yahoo directory, some people recommend business.com, but, really if you even some of these legal directories, make a directory assessment, consider the cost of the directory, see what kind of links you might be getting, see what kind of visibility those directories have. But paying for those directories can be a very powerful way to get links. But don't rely on that, and don't think your entire online budget into buying directory links, because it's just not going to be your best strategy. Spend those resources on getting good content for your site. Some factors to consider in terms of link building. Relevance is the key. So, getting links from, sites about kittens and things like that aren't going to be very helpful. The best links you can get are from other legal professionals, legally related sites, especially sites that are geographically similar to yours or practice related to yours. So, I always tell folks that, the hardest links and the best links to get are the links from your competition, because they're extremely relevant. They're usually geographically relevant, but of course people guard those links very closely because they don't want to help their competitors. And think about when we talk about authority and site importance, we're talking about the quality of the website. If someone just sets up a site yesterday and they want to start doing linking with you, and you've got an established site, it might not be as beneficial. Anchor text diversity. Both anchor text and diversity, we want to think with anchor text, that's the actual hyperlink, so it's the words in the hyperlink. So if you've got a link that says Chicago personal injury and it links back to your site and your site's about Chicago personal injury, that's a very good thing. But don't get stagnant with those. Make sure you're getting a variety of different links from a variety of different sources, with a variety of different keywords in there. And really, that's, again, to tie it all back to the content, the more that you can get your content in front of the right audience of people that are ready, willing, and able to link to and publicize your content, the more effectively you're going to attract links. I always say, don't think of links like trying to, build bales of hay. Think about them more like magnets. You want to do things on your site that are going to attract people to want to say, hey, that's a great post, or this is a great article, or this is a great piece of information. I'm going to link to it so when people come to my site, they're able to find this great piece of information.
And then we have some final thoughts to wrap up with today. Before we jump into final thoughts, I do have a few questions from our listeners. So if you don't mind, do you want to run through these really quickly?
Sure.
Great. Is there any advantage to doing individual niche websites? Like, let's say you have a general practice firm. Should you create a small website for personal injury and a separate website for criminal defense, and tailor websites specific to practice area, or is it okay to have one website with everything underneath?
That's a really good question, and the answer is that it really depends. What we try to do when we're assessing making web strategy decisions is trying to find a match for the goals, the budget, and the resources of each particular firm, and also the marketing message. So as a general guideline, it's a great idea to have a single site that is really firm-oriented. So it's going to have all the information about the attorneys, maybe some general practice area overviews. In terms of niche sites, though, what I would do with niche sites is go with blogs that are on a specific subject, so you can really break things down. So let's just take a hypothetical of a criminal defense site. Perhaps you have a site that's dedicated to drunk driving offenses, if you handle that. Maybe you have another site that's about drug charges, but those specific sites can be very effective in terms of search marketing. So if you've got the resources to add content to them, and you have the people in place and the budgets in place and the time resources in order to get those sites up and running, that's a really great way. Niche sites are a really great way to take advantage of web marketing.
Great. Another question. You recommended .com, but do .co, .biz, .us, .net still hold the same value, or would you recommend going with not your exact domain name, but having a .com as the ending?
That's another great question. As a general rule, the .com is still the ones that you named are what they call TLDs, and those are the top level domains. And so, as a general rule, if you can register all of your different .com, .net, .biz, .org, and it's not going to be much more expensive, and you can have those all redirect to the same site. So if you go with that direction, you're all right. I wouldn't recommend going with .biz or .info. They just don't have the same kind of credibility, at least in my opinion, as the .com does. Remember too, think about your users. Some of the more spammy offshoot domains you might lose some credibility with your users if you don't have a .com. I think .org is good in some situations, especially if you're doing some kind of like advocacy group site, maybe multiple law firms contributing to the site, and so you maybe organize in some way like that. But as a general rule, stick to .com. .co is rather new. I don't think that the verdict's out on whether that's going to be picked up as a prime domain or not. So stick to .com. If you're scared of your competition, buying up your domain under a different top-level domain, then register the .net and the .org, and then maybe some of these, maybe even the .co, and have those redirect really easy. Your host can even help you set that up to have them all redirect to the main site, but don't repeat the same site on all those different top-level domains. That'll just dilute your efforts.
And that actually leads into our last question. Well, should I buy domains that are related to my site and redirect them to my main site? So if I'm able to grab trafficlaws.com or Traffic Law Chicago, Traffic Law Atlanta, Traffic Law New York, and direct them all to one site. I mean, again, it kind of depends on whether you're going for geography or you're just trying to buy related domain names and redirect them to your main site. Is that valuable, or does that start to dilute after a certain amount or at all?
So this was a very popular strategy several years ago, where you'd buy up maybe 15 or 20 domains, and you have them all redirecting to the same domain with the hope that the search engines might look at that as some kind of benefit, or that you're trying to get direct type-in traffic, so people actually go in their web browser and type in a specific domain. And the truth is that we found that to be largely ineffective. You're much better off if you're going to do several domains. If you're going to register them, don't have them all redirect. You can park some domains if you're just trying to squat on them for future use. But the truth is, you're much better off getting a couple, do a main domain, especially if it's a branded domain, and then start thinking about a couple different niche practice area sites. If you've got a couple lawyers that can contribute, or if you've got the resources to have several blogs, go that route. Don't just buy domains for the sake of domains, for buying domains and redirecting them. You're not going to find that to be extremely beneficial. Domain registration's usually between $7 and $10 a year, so it's not that expensive if you do decide to go that route. But there's really not that much of a benefit, at least in my experience, to doing that.
Great. Well, thank you for answering those questions. And then final thoughts that you'd like to leave us with today.
Sure. So, again, I can't emphasize enough that I think I always ask people, tell me a reason why not to use WordPress. And so far the answers haven't been that strong. So I think WordPress is the way to go for the majority of folks listening. Spend time planning and organizing. Like we talked about at the beginning, the more time you spend on that plan, just like everything else, even success at trial, the more planning, the more organizing you do in advance, the better results you're going to get. You're not going to have to spend as much money. It's not going to take as long if you really put some thought into the planning. Schedule time for online. Lawyers are busy. There's no question about that. But ignoring the internet is just not an option anymore. Even if you start out in really small increments, schedule 15 minutes here, schedule a half hour there. So maybe you do some blog writing on the weekends or things like that. It's really important that you think about and actually have some structured time for online. And always think about them. And so by them, we mean your audiences. Again, the audiences are going to be the key. Think about all your different audiences. Think about the ways that people are going to find your site and what you're doing to help them and answer their questions. And then that brings us to our last one: solve, answer, inform, assist, and help. Don't just sit there and try to be another advertisement. The internet is not an advertising platform in terms of using your website, blogging, and social media. It's really an opportunity for you to connect, to engage with your users, help them answer their questions, demonstrate your value and your professional expertise, and that's really the way you're going to attract more clients to the web.
Well, thank you so much for joining us today, and we really appreciate everyone who logged in to listen to today's presentation. We will be sending out a recap email following this session, that you will have access to the full presentation and a recording of the audio to listen to as many times as you'd like after the session. I also encourage you to check out Guy's site, AttorneySync.com. It's got extremely valuable information there, as well as following him on Twitter. Guy, thank you again so much for your time. We really appreciate you joining us today and sharing all of your insights with Total Attorneys and our listeners.
Well, thanks everybody for listening. Chelsea, thank you, and thank you Total Attorneys as well. I really appreciate the opportunity.
Oh, our pleasure. And hopefully we'll talk to you again soon.
Take care.
Take care.